So this is a short video about our house rules, which we use for Master and Commander set, or the Black Seas rules, and the expansion for the from Warlord Games. So these are the quick reference sheets. They were originally made from by Modeler Phil and are available in his form on the Black Seas forum, Black Seas page on Facebook. So many of these things here, it's just the same. It's just a very clear, quick reference sheet. And we actually ended up using his sheets and then adding or changing what we wanted for our own house rules. So this is going to be the first section where I talk about these. And then in the second section, I'll talk about which changes we did to ship types and stats and so on. So there is a couple of things, like with level of sail, for instance, that you see here, if a yellow arc has no turn on the third move, so they're even more unwieldy than before. Also, I think the drifting works a little bit different than in the original rules. So that's the level of sail. So you have the full sail, battle sail, light sail, drifting, and anchor, just like in the original rules. Then you have the extra level of sail, and you have, for instance, you have in irons, and a little bit described how that works. And if I don't remember wrongly, that is also a little bit changed from the original rules. But you take damage if you drop too many levels of sail, especially if you end up in irons. And there is the cracking on, so you try to get more sail on, and there's a small risk with that. If you fail, you'll get the mass damage and minus the shooting. You have heaving too, which we've used quite a bit, where you'll slow down, and that's from that point. So if you're doing full sails and you slow down on a second move, then you're going to be slowed down from there on. You have the backing, where you'll use one of your moves. At least that's how we interpret this. So, or like how we run this is, we'll have one of the moves where you choose to back instead. So instead of going forward, you're going sideways in the direction of the wind. Tacking, there's a couple ways, different ways to tack. There's a maneuver you can do only in light sails, a zigzag maneuver. And there is one that you can do, or two that you can do on battle or light sail. One is a 180 turn, and one is another type of more normal turning into the wind. You see, you have to do a skill test for this, and you're not allowed to shoot. For wearing, we decided actually last battle that we're not going to have this in there anymore, because wearing, you're just turning with the wind. So no test and no limitations to shooting. Then there's the additional advanced rules. Some things are a little bit different than in the original. I think the entanglement, how that works, that it's at the end and it's shipped within one of another, and skill test is +2. So this is the second page, and on the top there is a little bit of how you do for evading collisions and what happens if you collide, the quoted hit token, and then what the sizes. Then we have our changed critical hit rules, basically taking into account the caliber of gun and the distance. So you see a heavy gun would have a certain, like a one additional, except for the initial first one that you roll another die to see if it's actually a crit, and that is then tempered by the size of the gun and the distance. There is a small section for the initial broadside, how that works, and then the modifiers. A lot of this stuff is unchanged. You have the different type of shots that you can load, and so on, and that's just like in the original game. And then the double shot and red hot shot. We've actually managed to set ourselves on fire once with that, so I'm actually, myself will never use them again. Don't tell anyone, but and we have the critical hit tables, the mast hit table, and the hull hit table. There is a few changes made there as well, but basically it's pretty close to original rules as far as the critical hit table goes. It's just how you get there that we ended up doing a little bit harder. We think it plays out better. There's a lot less of actual critical hit, especially at long distance, which I think would be kind of realistic, right? Not sure, but this is the way we run it, and if you want to run it as well this way, I'll actually post a link to these quick reference sheets as our version of this original sheets by Modular Phil, where we've made the changes that we want to these different things like boarding actions and so on. The biggest change, I guess, that plays out most is that change to the critical hit system. And here we are in BattleScribe. This is the desktop version. There is a phone app as well that you can use. And I'll also upload, if you want to just try our house rules, I'll upload the index file that you could add to your BattleScribe, and then you can use the different updated forces that we have here. So here I'm just adding forces to a roster just to show off the different ones. I haven't made changes. We haven't made changes to nations that we haven't really played. So the changes are mostly British, French, and Spanish, and some to the US ships. So a few more types of famous ships with points, cost, and so on. These have all been tested, so they play out pretty nicely. They should be pretty balanced. You have some weird ones like the Glatton with all her coronades and so on. Pretty interesting, kind of like the Essex from the last battle we played with all her coronades. So many more. Since I'm playing British, it tends to be a lot of famous ships. Maybe that's not the most important change, but they're there and you can try them. So what we've changed quite significantly, and that's for all nations, is how first rates work. There is a 100 gun first rate and there is a 120 gun first rate, and they have a little bit different in stats, as you can see, and also in prices. So we've tweaked the prices, the cost, and then we've also both for the 100 and the 120 gun. And you can see that has another 2 heavy guns, hence the bigger cost, and also more ship points. So those are to represent those real big monsters like L'Océan and so on. Yeah. So it's going to remove these, and then we go into third rate. So we've split the third rates into more classes as well. So you have the normal 64s, and then you have your average size 74s. Of course, there were middling and large 74s, but we haven't taken those into account since the system, I think it would be too much. It would be hard to like squeeze it all in there with differences. So we added in an 80 gun, and the 80 gun, what is the difference from the 74 normal is of course ship points, more ship points, and then it has another additional light gun. So it has 332 instead of the normal then 322, and no other changes. It's ship points and another gun, of course, an increase in stats. These have been thoroughly tested. We've played them in many battles using 80 gun third rates where it's appropriate, so we try to use it like historical ships. So if the historical ship was a larger third rate, then it would be an 80 gunner. Then we have added some more recies and so on, and another type of frigate, a fourth rate, a heavy frigate. More nations than the States were using those heavy frigates eventually. So the Recy 74 is actually, the British had a few of those. It was just the French as well. Cut down large fourth rate. Then we have the frigates, the heavy frigates, 311, so another heavy gun compared to the smaller fifth rates. Oh, so we split the fifth rates into 2 types. So like we have a large fifth rate that has the stats of the one in the original rules, and then we have a smaller fifth rate, costs less, but also doesn't have 2 heavy guns. It has 2 light guns instead. So a few more types. We found it plays really well. We've used it in our campaign, and it adds a lot of flavor to your battle because there is more options. for the rated ships. We've also added and changed the costs for some of the unrated ships. So I'm going to add a few here and we're going to go through them. So for instance, we have the corvette type, which is basically the sloop of war, right? A 3-masted ship-rigged ship, or 4, yeah. So let's see. So some of these ships, basically the corvette is just a smaller version of a 6th rate, right? It has more ship points than a brig, and then it has 1 heavy and 1 carronade, so quite a heavy ornament for a small ship. Also it costs 95 in between the brig and the 6th rate. We have the cutter, and you see here the rate of knots is actually higher. It's 6. Some of these smaller ships have their rate of knots cranked up a bit, and that's also played out really well. Some of these smaller ships could be fast in some points of sail. Of course, bigger ships could be faster too, and I'm going to go through how we did that later. We added a small brig as well as the normal brig, because brigs came in many different sizes. Basically a little bit less ship points. Instead of 20 it has 18, and then instead of 2 heavy guns you have 2 light guns. So all these have been tested thoroughly in our campaign, and I can promise you they play out really well. The stats are balanced as far as we can tell, and also the ship costs are balanced. So here I show some changes. Of course we changed some. I'm going to go through that, what we changed with the nations themselves, like the national stats. But one of the major changes to the stuff that you can add to the ship is if you choose the streamlined. So streamlined hull, instead of what it has in the original rule, in our rules, the streamlined hull will actually, and I go through that a little further down here, but it will give you +1 to the rate of knots. So every move is +1 to the rate of knots. So we've kept most of the stuff in. We changed for the French how the streamlined hull works, so it's cheaper, and we removed the addition for the sturdy for the French, because we also removed the +1 to shooting for the British. The Spanish are more or less unchanged. Actually their overgunned is working for more ships, I think, more ship types, and so on. But the British still have tacking and admiralty and so on. Yeah, and here you can see we haven't added all types to all nations, and that's a little bit historical. There's a little bit less famous ships, because my friends they haven't made up that many famous ships. And in the end, I have to say, when we play our campaign and our battles, we tend to limit the famous ships quite a bit, because they tend to be a little bit overpowered when you want to run it more historical. That's just us, it's just flavor, but that's the way I feel about it, that they tend to run a little bit overpowered, and so we end up just using the normal ship lists and then upgrading the ships from there, giving them their own story from there. But sometimes we'll run a famous ship. And here's the Essex and Essex Junior that were changed for their latest battle we played, and so on. You see the US have the 4th rate and the 4th rate heavy frigate. They don't have the larger ships. They got this later on. We might update. We haven't updated the United States section of the house rules that much, because mainly we've been playing that. As I said, we have Great Britain, and we have then we have France, and we have Spain. Those are the main ones in our campaign. So this is the data editor. This is where you can actually make the changes. If you want to know more about this one, I'm just going to show you a little bit an overview. So the shared entries, like that all nations will share, and where you can go in and change that in the black says the GST file. You can go in and change some of those things, so like I did, and then you have to add it too. So here we have Britain, so here you have to add it to the route selection, and here you can also add your famous ships, so they're in here. on this list, you see, and this is actually where you add those famous ships with the rules and everything. And here you also add, like I said, the different ship types that you want to have in the fleet that you already created and in the shared GST file. So they need to be there, and then you can reference it here. And you can see the stats, and you can change them, tweak them, and add some rules like we have here, and veteran crew and so on. Also nice with this type of application that this is the BattleScribe is that you can actually add in so that the change happens automatically. So if I choose streamlined hull, then the ship stat will actually update with that +1 rate of knots, if you know how to do this. So I recommend peeking through it. It's not very hard to learn. If you find it some difficulty, ask away. Just ask me in questions below, or I could do a more detailed video if you like, where I describe it a little bit more in depth how you use the data editor. But for now, if you just want to try our rosters and everything, I'll make a link here below in the description of the video, where you can just go and get that index file, and that index file you will then have to add to your roster section in the app. I'll actually, after I show you here, I'm gonna give you a short screenshot here of how you actually do that, how you go about adding that index file to BattleScribe. My hope is, and I because they asked for a little bit of like input, because they're updating the official app for the game, right, for Black Seas. And I hope they're gonna, I sent them a detailed list of all the changes I would like to see. So I hope they've maybe used some of that, and then you guys and me, we could just use the official app. What they would need in there is just a way to add additional ship types of your own, and a way to be able to tweak the stats and the costs of ships. I also suggested, and that would be a dream, would be that you'd have some kind of like an algorithm where you could create a ship of your own with some stats, like a famous ship, for instance, or a ship type, and then depending on the amount of special rules you have and the stats, actual stats of the ship, then it would actually calculate, give you an example of a cost, so you wouldn't have to do that in your head. And then maybe you could tweak that after if it turns out a little bit wrong. But you know, being able to tweak what you have, like tweaking rules and so on, I think you guys should try it. Go ahead. And I mean, we've had a lot of fun. It is fun. We haven't changed a lot in the game. I mean, we had more changes in, and we were using other systems and rules from other systems, and then we've gone back and streamlined a little bit the way we run our Black Seas games, because we tend to maybe play a larger battle, and you don't want too much of the really in-depth rule for a larger battle, because then we just take days to play, and we don't have that time. So if we want to have more in-depth for now, I mean, what we'd use, and the system I find the best for that is actually the one I've had on the channel region, is a B2 quarters. And on Monday, also in 2 days from now, of course, this is when I'm recording the video, but we're actually going to play a battle using those rules again, and just 2 ships, and it's going to be finally the Chesapeake against the Shannon, and I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm going to be all-time YouTuber for that battle, because it's going to be my friends that are playing it, and I'll be recording it, so I'll be focusing on recording, so hopefully we can get more an interesting recording, and maybe I'll actually also make it a little bit like a vlog, so I'll record as we go with the camera in my hand. We'll see how we end up running that, but anyway, it will be a lot of fun, and those of course are a lot more in that. So any questions you have about our house rules and the changes we made, just ask away below. Also, of course, like I mentioned, we use these rules for our campaign that is nearing its completion. I know I've been talking about this, but I really don't want to release it until we've played through the whole thing and tweaked everything, and I've updated all the maps and so on. There's a lot of work, and I'm making a lot of videos, and so it's been a little bit on the back burner. But once that's done and we've played through, and of course everyone has to have the time to play because we're 4 players, and to get that organized, you know, real life and so on. So once we have that organized, then I will be releasing that campaign to you as well. We've had a lot of fun with it, and it's in this iteration, I think this is the 4th or 5th iteration of it. It works, kind of like even if a player would lose the battle completely, it balances out, kind of. So, and also in sense, I mean, it makes you want to keep your ships. You're careful with your ships because there is definite advantages to keeping ships longer. Like kind of like the campaign in the original rules, where eventually, like after you've survived 2 battles, you'll be able to start rolling a die to see if maybe it steps up a level. So if it was inexperienced, it would become a normal ship, and if it was normal, it can become a veteran ship with a veteran crew. All those other advantages that you can get with different types of personalities on board of the ships and so on. So a lot of fun and a lot of incentive to keep your ships alive. So that was all. Subscribe if you haven't. It will help me a lot. I'm really trying to be honest, grow this channel a bit because I'm having fun with it, and I hope to eventually here maybe add a little bit of my own t-shirt store. I'm also making drawings with tall ships and so on. So I've been looking at making a little bit range of t-shirts. So eventually, I hope I will be able to launch that through this channel. Any content particular you would like to see, just also let me know in the comments.